My 5-year-old daughter, Lily, underwent surgery but sadly passed away. While I was consumed by grief, my husband Bob seemed indifferent. At Lily's funeral, Bob and his parents didn't even attend.
Have you called him?
I've tried calling over and over, but he's not answering. Where could he possibly be? During the entire funeral, I didn't even have time to mourn Lily properly, as I kept trying to reach Bob on the phone. Finally, just before we moved to the burial site, the call went through. "Where are you? It's almost time for the burial. If you don't come now, you'll miss your chance to say goodbye to Lily." When I urged him to come quickly, Bob responded with a tired, disinterested voice, and then said something that shocked me.
"I'm not coming to the funeral. Spot has a cold, and we're at the vet right now. Just handle the funeral without me. Oh, and you're not keeping all the funeral donations, okay?"
I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Before I could respond, he hung up, and I stood there in shock.
Did you reach him? Will he make it in time?
He said their dog has a cold, and the whole family is at the vet, so they're not coming.
What?
My father was even more furious than I was about their reason for not coming. Unable to forgive them, my father came up with a plan and decided to take action. My name is Catherine. I'm 28 years old, and I work as a web designer. I live with my husband, Bob, and our most precious daughter in the world, Lily. Lily is now 1 year old and has grown into an adorable little girl, but her birth was quite difficult. She was born early, at a time when I wished she could have stayed in my belly a little longer. When she was born, she weighed only 3 pounds and was immediately moved to an incubator without me even holding her. On top of that, her organs hadn't fully developed yet, so she had to undergo several surgeries with her tiny body. As a result of the surgeries, Lily somehow managed to survive. However, our relief was short-lived when the doctor told us that even after she was discharged, Lily would need 24-hour care. They explained that she would need to be fed through a tube, and there was no guarantee that her health wouldn't relapse at any time. I regretted not being able to protect her in my womb until she was fully grown, and I couldn't stop crying. Why, my child? Why did this have to happen to us? I blamed myself every day. What made things even harder for me, both mentally and physically, was Bob and his parents, Kevin and Susan. When Lily was born, she wasn't in a condition where visitors could see her, but Bob had informed both sets of parents about her birth. My parents simply congratulated us over the phone, saying they'd celebrate when things calmed down. But Kevin and Susan were different.
"She's born. We're going to the hospital right now."
They were so excited about her birth that they didn't listen to the full details of Lily's condition and rushed over immediately.
"Bob, where's Lily?"
Bob, looking a bit awkward, guided them to see her. When they saw Lily, hooked up to tubes and too fragile to be held, they said,
"What is this?"
Realizing that they couldn't even hold their granddaughter, they blamed me.
"Why didn't you give birth to a healthy baby for our family?"
"That's right. Do you know how much we were looking forward to meeting our grandchild?"
Even though I had just had a C-section and couldn't even get out of bed, they still blamed me.
"Stop pretending to be sick. Get up and explain yourself."
"Why did you even marry Bob if you couldn't have a healthy child? How are you going to take responsibility for this? When will this baby ever get better?"
I had no idea what to do, feeling completely overwhelmed, so I looked over at Bob, hoping he would help.
"I need to go to the restroom."
But Bob just left, without helping me at all. After he left, I was left crying, apologizing to them. I'm so sorry. Kevin and Susan kept lecturing me for nearly an hour, but during that time, Bob didn't come back. It was only after they finally left that Bob returned.
My stomach started hurting, so I was stuck in the restroom the whole time.
I knew he was lying. His eyes were darting all over the place. It was such an obvious lie, so I asked him why he abandoned me instead of helping. Why did you leave when they were yelling at me like that? If you had explained things better on the phone, maybe this wouldn't have happened. Through my tears, I pleaded with him. I thought he would reflect on what happened and try to handle things better in the future. But instead, he sighed deeply and, with an annoyed tone, said,
My parents aren't wrong, and you deserve to get yelled at. After all, this is your fault for not giving birth to a healthy baby. Don't try to act like it's my responsibility, too.
After saying that, Bob clicked his tongue and left. From that day on, Bob never came to visit us at the hospital again. Even after we were discharged from the hospital, Bob continued to treat me and Lily coldly, avoiding any contact with us. Hey, I bought Lily a cute outfit today. Isn't it adorable? No matter how much I tried to reach out, Bob acted like nothing happened. When he did talk to me, it was just to tell me how he was going to avoid us.
I've got work dinners tomorrow and the day after, so I won't need dinner. Also, I'm going to start eating breakfast at the office from now on.
I understand that he might want to avoid facing the reality that his daughter isn't like other kids, but this attitude was getting harder to deal with. I asked Bob to help out a little with parenting. Hey, Lily is your child too, you know? Please, can't you just listen to me? Help me with raising her. For the first time in a while, I looked him in the eye and told him how I felt. But Bob didn't respond the way I hoped. He looked at me coldly and pushed me away.
If you wanted that, you should have had a healthy baby in the first place. Don't try to push your responsibility onto me.
After that, Bob distanced himself from me even more. No matter what I said, he wouldn't listen, and all of my pleas fell on deaf ears. I had nearly given up on the idea of Bob helping to take care of Lily. When I needed a break or had errands to run, I decided to rely on my parents for help. Today, my dad is coming over to take care of Lily since I have to go to the hospital.
If that's the case, I won't be home until late. Actually, I'll just crash at a colleague's place tonight.
Whenever he heard that my parents were coming over, Bob made sure not to be around. He didn't want them to realize that he wasn't involved in Lily's care at all. On the days my dad came, Bob would find ways to waste time elsewhere, pretending to be busy, so that my parents wouldn't notice his lack of interest in parenting.
Earlier today, I bumped into Bob near the station. He said he's working late again tonight.
Yeah, seems like it.
Bob's such a hard worker. He's probably trying so hard to support you because you're handling all the child care and housework.
I wanted to tell them the truth, but I had no proof, and I knew it would just sound like I was complaining.
Hearing about how hard Bob's working makes me want to try even harder to help with Lily's care.
Watching my dad, who had completely bought into Bob's lies, made my heart ache. Oh right, Lily's surgery is next month. Could you or Mom come over again on that day?
Of course. Is Bob going to be at work? He's really working hard for you and Lily. I'll take time off from work to be there for the surgery if you need me.
Yeah, thank you. Dad always put me and Lily first. My dad, John, is a musician who is also active on TV and in magazines. Not only is he a composer, but my father's warm personality is also widely appreciated, which has led him to appear as a commentator on news programs and variety shows, expanding his career. Despite his hectic schedule, he postponed important engagements and took time off to be with me when Bob couldn't. I was so grateful to my dad for doing things that Bob never would, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. By the time Lily turned 5, I had been living this way for years when suddenly, my mother-in-law, Susan, reached out to me. I hadn't heard from her since Lily's birth, and we had lost contact. Her sudden call scared me, and I didn't pick it up. The phone rang for a while before going to voicemail. Later, when I listened to her message, a chill ran down my spine.
Hello, is Lily's health better now? You haven't shown your face around here since she was born, have you? Well, now the neighbors are gossiping. They're saying we haven't even seen our granddaughter and that we're making her up. So, if Lily is doing better, you should bring her over here to visit us.
Hearing Susan's voice for the first time in 5 years, it was clear nothing had changed. She was still as self-centered as ever. The only reason she wanted to see us was because she was worried about what the neighbors thought, which made me reluctant to go. But when Bob came home, he didn't even ask my opinion and immediately said,
"We're going to my parents' house this weekend."
I figured Kevin and Susan must have called him too. We hadn't visited them in all these years, so I was surprised by his sudden decision. Of course, I didn't want to go, remembering how they blamed me right after Lily's birth. But it had been 5 years. As much as I hated the idea, I felt I had no choice but to go. The day we were to visit their house finally came. "Hey, can you help me get Lily into the car?"
What? Not my problem. Do it yourself.
Even though Bob was the one who decided we should visit his parents, he didn't help with any of the preparations, and I struggled with everything on my own. As a result, we ended up leaving much later than planned.
I said we'd leave by 11, but here we are, 40 minutes late. You're really slow at everything, aren't you?
If you had helped, we could have left earlier. Frustrated by his comment, I shot back. During the entire car ride, Bob stayed in a bad mood, complaining all the way to his parents' house.
I should have never married someone like you. By now, my kid should be going to tutoring sessions or swim practice, getting ready to be a top student. And you ruined all of that.
I tried to ignore his words, staring out the car window. But things didn't get any easier once we arrived at his parents' house.
Hurry up and get inside. What if the neighbors see?
Kevin and Susan seemed to believe that Lily was perfectly healthy by now. When they saw her in a wheelchair, they immediately ushered us inside, worried about what the neighbors might think.
Bob, did you make sure nobody saw her from the parking lot to the house?
Of course, I was careful.
They spoke as if Lily was something to be ashamed of. I couldn't help but feel the urge to speak up. "Excuse me, but..." Just as I was about to defend Lily, Susan interrupted me.
Catherine, how long are you going to keep Lily like this? She should be better by now, right? You keep putting her in that wheelchair, babying her like this. If you keep spoiling her, she'll never get better.
Susan clearly didn't understand anything about Lily's condition. It was the same when she was born. Even though we explained everything, she refused to listen, assuming that Lily would magically recover as she grew older and yelling at us when she didn't. While I stood there, speechless, Kevin chimed in as well.
Isn't she causing Bob trouble too? You should just hurry up and get her surgery done. I can't tell anyone at work that I have a grandchild like this.
Kevin wasn't interested in understanding either, just saying whatever suited him. It became clear that, even after 5 years, they didn't truly see Lily as their granddaughter. If I had known they would say things like this, I never would have come here. All I wanted at that moment was to leave as soon as possible. Bob, I'm taking Lily home now, so can I have the car keys?
What? No way. And by the way, I bought that car with my money. Why do you act like it's yours? If you want to go home, take the train.
Bob said this and then went back to the living room to snack with Kevin and reminisce about the past. While I waited, the family dog, Spot, kept barking at me, thinking I was an intruder.
Catherine, can you stop stressing out Spot? What if the neighbors hear him barking and figure out you're here?
Scolded like that, I was kicked out of the living room and told to wait by the front door. A chilly breeze was blowing, so I took off my cardigan and wrapped it around Lily. Trying to reassure both her and myself, I softly said, "Lily, I'm sorry, just a little longer, okay? Daddy will be here soon, and then we can go home." 2 hours later, Bob finally said we could leave.
All right, we're heading out.
Yeah, next time, Bob, you can come alone.
And Lily, don't come back until you're better.
It was a roundabout way of saying we weren't welcome, but honestly, I didn't mind. However, during the ride home, Bob said,
We're going back next month.
"What? But they told me not to come."
Of course, that was a lie. If we don't go, they'll be angry and think we're not showing any effort. We have to keep going next month and the month after that to stay on their good side.
Bob, trying to read between the lines of what Susan said, explained it like this, but I didn't understand. I don't think it was a lie. They wouldn't even let me in the living room today. I really think it's best if I don't go. When I said that, Bob sighed.
That's exactly why Mom doesn't like you. Just do what I say.
I ended up being talked into it and agreed to go with him again next month. The day came for us to visit Bob's parents again, but on the day of, Bob suddenly said he didn't feel like going.
I think I'll skip it today. You go by yourself.
What? If you're not going, why should we? I'll call Susan and tell her we're not coming.
What? My mom isn't just sitting around all day. She's making time for us. So get over there already.
I was stunned by how selfish he sounded. But I knew if I pushed back now, it would only lead to him taking it out on Lily later, and I couldn't let that happen. So, I reluctantly agreed to go. When we arrived at their house, Kevin and Susan were clearly unhappy.
Why are you here? Didn't I tell you not to come anymore?
Bob's not even here. So what's the point of you being here?
I'm sorry. They didn't let us inside, and we were scolded and sent away right at the front door. It was a pointless trip. When I told Bob what happened after we got home, he laughed out loud.
So they didn't let you in after all, right? Well, that makes sense. Mom and Dad don't like you too.
Bob had been toying with us, looking down on us the entire time. That was the last straw for me, and I finally snapped. What the hell is this? Do you know how long it takes to prepare Lily just to go out? It's more than 30 minutes. And we have to be extra cautious because she could bring back any kind of illness. You might think this is just a game, but for me, it's a nightmare. Stop playing these games with us. For the first time, I raised my voice at Bob, letting out everything I'd been holding in. Bob looked shocked for a moment, but then quickly returned to his usual self and said,
No need to get so angry. This is your fault anyway for keeping Lily away from my parents. Your parents visit and see Lily all the time, so you've been the unfair one.
He completely missed the point and started shouting at me, telling me to leave. At that moment, I realized I couldn't stay with Bob any longer. I decided to return to my parents' house. When I returned to my parents' house after a long time, they welcomed me and Lily warmly.
If you told us, we would have picked you up. It must have been tough getting here. Your mom made some coffee, so stay a while and relax. I'll take care of Lily in the meantime.
My dad busily attended to Lily, making sure I could rest.
So, I heard you and Bob had an argument. That must have been hard. I'm sure Bob didn't mean to take it out on you and Lily. He's probably just stressed from work, and you just happened to be there. Don't worry about it.
Not knowing the real reason for the fight, my dad tried to reassure me. Thank you. That was all I could say in response to his kindness. Unbeknownst to me, my dad had called Bob to try to smooth things over.
I called Bob earlier. He said he realized he went too far and feels bad about it now. He asked me to tell you that you're welcome to come back anytime.
What? Bob said that? I was shocked to hear such an apology from Bob, who had never said sorry before. Really? Bob said that? As I was processing this, a message from Bob popped up on my phone.
Oh, looks like Bob texted you. Maybe he's saying he misses you and Lily, right?
My dad nudged me playfully, grinning. With a slightly hopeful expression, I opened Bob's message, but my excitement quickly vanished. The message from Bob was the exact opposite of what my father had just told me. Bob wrote that he was enjoying the peace without us and suggested that I should just continue living at my parents' house permanently.
What did Bob say?
I couldn't bring myself to tell my father the truth, especially since he had no idea the message was anything like that. He said I should take it easy here for a little longer. I might stay for another month or so. Since I'm back, I'd like to clean up my old room. I lied on the spot, trying to keep my dad from worrying, and acted cheerful. Of course, my parents were happy to let me stay as long as I wanted. About a week after staying at my parents' house, Lily's condition suddenly took a turn for the worse. While I was taking a shower, my mother rushed in, alarmed by how Lily was acting. Lily?
Stay calm. Let's call the hospital first.
Panicking, I called the hospital and emergency services. Despite being on the verge of losing my mind, I stayed by Lily's side as we rode in the ambulance. While Lily was undergoing emergency surgery, I called Bob. Hello, Lily's condition suddenly worsened, and she's in emergency surgery right now. Bob, as usual, responded in a lethargic tone.
Surgery.
Is he not even going to say anything supportive? As I worried about his response, my father arrived, having driven to the hospital.
Catherine, how is she? Did you get a hold of Bob?
Hearing my father's voice, Bob quickly changed his tune.
I'm on my way. Which hospital?
Well, the general hospital near my parents' place. As soon as I told him where we were, he hung up. I was shocked by how suddenly his attitude shifted, and I told my dad about it, still in shock. Bob's coming.
That's great. You must feel relieved that he's on his way.
My father said that, but I couldn't feel genuinely happy. I would later understand the reason for this discomfort, but for now, I was just confused.
John, thank you for staying by Catherine's side in my place. I'm here now, so I'll take over from here.
The first thing Bob said when he saw us was words of concern for my father. In that moment, I had a vague realization. It became clear that, to him, pleasing my father was more important than Lily.
Thanks. Now that you're here, I'll head home. Let me know if anything changes, and I'll come right back.
As soon as my father left, Bob's demeanor shifted again.
I was relaxing at home, and now this. Don't call me when John's around like that. You forced me to come here.
What do you mean forced? Of course you should come. This is about your daughter. Bob's words bothered me, so I spoke up. It infuriated me that he implied he wouldn't have come if my father hadn't been there. His indifference toward his own daughter was simply too much to bear. I knew it wasn't the time to argue, especially with Lily in surgery, but I couldn't hold back anymore. No matter the situation, if something happens to Lily, you should be here immediately. That's what any parent would do. After I said that, Bob became irritated at being lectured and started grumbling with an annoyed expression on his face.
Don't push your ideas abnormal onto me. You don't even know what's going on with me.
What could possibly be more important than Lily right now? I was sure Bob was just upset because he had been interrupted while playing mobile games or something equally trivial. I was beyond frustrated by his total lack of responsibility as a father. We sat in silence, the tension thick, when the doctor finally appeared. From the doctor's uneasy expression, I knew everything. Then the doctor, with a heavy heart, began to speak. What? Lily? He told us that Lily had passed away during the surgery. I stared at the doctor, unable to blink for a while. Then, all I could do was break down in tears right there. Still unable to fully grasp the reality of losing Lily, both Bob and I informed our parents. My parents rushed to be by my side, but Kevin and Susan never came. However, I barely had time to think about their absence, as I was immediately busy with paperwork and funeral arrangements. As I began preparing for the funeral, I suddenly realized, wait, where's Bob? At first, I thought he had just gone to the restroom. But he never came back, and the funeral proceeded without him.
Where's Bob?
Both my father and mother began looking around, realizing his absence. Kevin and Susan weren't there either.
Catherine, why don't you try calling Bob?
Following my father's suggestion, I tried calling Bob. But no matter how many times I called, he didn't pick up. Other attendees began to notice that neither Bob nor his parents were there, and everyone seemed confused. Even during the service, I kept calling Bob repeatedly. Eventually, it was time to move to the burial site. Bob, where are you? What are you doing? Even as I carried out my duties as the chief mourner, I continued trying to reach Bob. My father also started calling him, and finally, we got through. Where are you? It's time for the burial. This is your last chance to say goodbye to Lily. Hurry. With time running out, I spoke rapidly, urging him to come. Then Bob, in his usual lethargic tone, said,
Nope, I'm not coming. You handle it on your own. Oh, but don't even think about keeping all the funeral donations for yourself.
What do you mean you're not coming? And no matter how much Kevin and Susan dislike us, it's basic decency for them to attend, right?
I've got bigger things to deal with than Lily's funeral right now.
Bob's voice grew louder in response to my words.
Spot's sick with a cold, and we've been taking him to the vet. I even stepped out just to take your call. Now I'm going back inside, so I'm hanging up.
Bob was prioritizing the family dog's cold over his own daughter's funeral. Without waiting for my response, Bob hung up. I stood there in disbelief. What? I called him back immediately, but I was already blocked. I couldn't believe that Lily's funeral was being pushed aside for this. There were plenty of other options. He could have left Spot with someone, or even taken him to a pet hotel. And why did all three of them have to go to the vet? Surely one person would have been enough.
Catherine, what did Bob say?
My father rushed over, seeing me standing in shock with the phone still in my hand. I had always made excuses for Bob to save face, but now, I couldn't do that anymore. I told my father exactly what Bob had said. Bob isn't planning on attending the funeral. He said the family dog has a cold, and taking him to the vet is more important. As I tried to explain, the sadness overwhelmed me, and I began to cry. My father, looking confused and furrowing his brow, responded.
What does that even mean?
I went on to tell him that Bob, his parents, and the dog were all at the vet, and that despite not coming to the funeral, Bob still wanted a share of the funeral donations. It's just too much. It's not like all three of them need to be with the dog just because it has a cold. My father gently rubbed my back, trying to comfort me. He seemed to be thinking deeply as he spoke. I get that they're worried about the dog, but Bob could have come alone. He could have made arrangements and still been here for Lily. It's not just about this funeral. It sounds like Bob has been neglecting us too for a long time. I finally confessed to my father about Bob's rude behavior at home, how Lily and I had no place in his family, and how they constantly spoke ill of us. My father, having trusted Bob with his daughter and granddaughter, was at a loss for words. And that's why I think they don't really care about Lily's funeral. As soon as I said it out loud, the sadness overwhelmed me, and I couldn't stop crying. My father stayed by my side without saying a word, just offering his presence. A few minutes later, my mother came in to tell us it was time to say our final goodbyes to Lily.
Let's go. We'll talk about Bob later.
My father's words reminded me that Lily was the priority right now, and I shifted my focus. We said our goodbyes to Lily, and the long, painful day finally came to an end. Back at home, I told my parents everything about Bob and his family, starting from the very beginning. My mother was shocked when she learned that Bob had prioritized their dog over Lily. I also told them how I hadn't been able to reach Bob since then. They hated me and Lily. Maybe they feel relieved now. Thinking about it makes me so angry. As I let out the anger that had been building up, my parents nodded quietly in understanding.
I completely understand how you feel, Catherine. Let me handle Bob for a while, okay?
Okay. I had no idea what my father had in mind, but his words confused me. Sensing my confusion, he spoke gently.
Don't worry. Leave it to me, and take some time to rest.
Trusting my father, I decided to take a break from work and spend some time recovering at home. A few months later, my father, being a musician, released a new song and essay. My mother and I sat together, watching the TV show where he was set to appear. "Oh, here comes Dad." When asked about the inspiration behind his new work, my father explained,
Actually, my 5-year-old granddaughter passed away due to illness. Both my daughter and I were devastated, and to make matters worse, my son-in-law behaved in ways I could hardly believe. I channeled all of that sadness and anger into these works.
As soon as my father finished speaking, the song and essay created a huge response. People analyzed the lyrics, discussed my father's words, and those in similar situations shared their sympathy. It became big news. Many people read my father's essay and lyrics, expressing shock at the unimaginable behavior we had endured, and their support for both my father and me flooded in. Most of the people watching the TV didn't know who Bob was. So, while he wasn't directly identified, those who knew him figured it out immediately. This was because, when we got married, Bob had bragged to everyone about how my father was a well-known musician who appeared on TV and in magazines.
I married that famous guy John's daughter. Pretty cool, right? I mean, if you really want, I could get you his autograph or something.
He'd go around saying that to his friends and colleagues. Bob's deferential attitude toward my father was never genuine. It was all just so he could hand out autographs and boast to those around him. If he upset my father and damaged their relationship, he wouldn't be able to brag anymore, let alone get autographs. So, he went out of his way to act like the perfect husband in front of my father. But now, all those bragging actions had come back to bite him. Messages from my friends poured in. Of course, Bob had also pretended to be a good husband around my friends, so when his true nature was exposed, they were furious on my behalf. Amid all the texts and calls from my friends, Bob called me too. I had ignored his calls while replying to my friends, but the phone wouldn't stop ringing. The same Bob who had blocked my number when it suited him was now desperately trying to get in touch. I sighed at the sight of his name on the screen, but eventually decided to answer.
Hey, you need to get John to take back what he said. I'm getting flooded with calls, and so are my parents. Do something.
It seemed Bob had been getting a lot of messages too. Apparently, both he and his parents had been bragging about my father as well.
Come on, he'll listen to you, right? Tell him I'm sorry, and ask him to take it back.
Even over the phone, I could tell Bob was panicking, probably pale with worry. Knowing this, I made it clear that I wouldn't ask my father to do anything. No, this is your last chance to realize how much pain Lily and I endured. Maybe now that people know, you'll finally learn something. I said this firmly, but Bob continued to plead.
Please, I'm begging you. Fine, you can keep all the funeral donations if you want. Isn't that what you're really mad about? Do whatever you want with it. Just fix this.
It's not about the money. Bob's insensitive words made me snap, and I raised my voice in anger. It's not about the money. It's about everything you've done to me and Lily that I can never forgive. And that includes Kevin and Susan. I said this in a low voice and then hung up the phone. My mother, who had been watching the whole thing, immediately knew I had been talking to Bob and gently rubbed my back after I ended the call. I had hoped that my father's actions would make them reflect a little, but they did something unbelievable instead. One night, just after my father came home, the doorbell rang. When my mother checked the intercom, she let out a gasp.
What's wrong?
My father rushed to check, and there, standing at the door, were Bob and his parents. Cautiously, My father pressed the button to speak through the intercom.
Hello.
Oh, is that John? We're so sorry for all the trouble Bob has caused.
Kevin said, half smiling, with a slightly insincere tone. Judging that they hadn't come to cause any harm, my father decided to continue the conversation.
So, what do you want?
Well, we were hoping you could retract your statements from today's TV show.
That's not going to happen. Please leave.
My father's firm response caused their demeanor to change immediately.
We came all the way here, trying to be polite, and this is the attitude we get. Have you no heart?
Exactly. We didn't even have to come, but we did. And let's not forget, all of this is your daughter's fault. If she had just given birth to a normal, healthy child, none of this would have happened.
Excuse me, but do you even realize what you've done?
What? We just wanted a healthy grandchild. We've been stuck with a wife who couldn't give us that. What's wrong with that?
Exactly. And it's because you didn't raise your daughter properly that we had to step in and teach her a lesson. All of this is your family's fault.
No matter what my father said, they insisted everything was our fault. My father remained calm, but their rude behavior was pushing him to his limit.
You can try to get public sympathy all you want, but it won't work. In the end, people will see that you're the one at fault.
We're at fault for not having a healthy child. I've heard enough. Regardless of the child's health, it's our duty to love and care for them.
Oh, please, spare me the righteous talk.
Their shouting became so loud that neighbor must have called the police, because officers soon arrived.
Police? No, that's unnecessary. We're just...
Kevin started to panic at the sight of the police. Deep down, they probably knew they were in the wrong. They tried to leave in a hurry but were quickly stopped and taken away by the officers. Even during questioning, they were more worried about public opinion than anything else. The next day, we found out that reporters had shown up outside our house, and the incident ended up in the tabloids. The headline read, "Is this the family behind the heartless words mentioned in John's essay?" And it quickly became a hot topic. As soon as people identified Bob and Kevin, their companies were flooded with calls questioning why they were employing such people. The number of complaints led both Bob and Kevin to be placed on house suspension. Faced with relentless harassment from strangers, the three of them became too afraid to leave their house and eventually resigned from their jobs, choosing to live quietly in hiding. One day, Bob sent me divorce papers in the mail. Along with them, he included a letter. "Well, I'm giving up all rights to the house to you." Bob had given up the house we once shared with Lily, along with all of his assets, and it seemed they had fled somewhere. After reading the letter, my father said,
Well, at least you managed to get divorced without any trouble.
"Yeah?" I nodded at his words and quickly submitted the divorce papers. And so, several years passed since the divorce. I had lost my beloved daughter Lily, divorced Bob, and sold the house. I had lost everything. I had no regrets about divorcing Bob or selling the house. In fact, I felt a sense of relief. But when it came to losing Lily, I felt like there was a gaping hole in my heart. Still, I know that's not what Lily would want to see from her mother. So, I've kept moving forward, returned to work, and am gradually rebuilding my life. Lily, today your mom is going to do her best again. I say this to her every day, and her memory continues to give me strength. Even if I meet a wonderful partner someday and have more children, I will never forget Lily. When I'm blessed with a new life, I'll make sure to tell that child all about her. For Lily's sake, I'll live today to the fullest and make it a wonderful day.